1921 storm, which was supposedly 50% less than the 1859. So 1989, we have a big storm, way bigger than the one we had a week ago, way bigger. And that fried a transformer in Quebec, knocked out power to 9 million people for something like 6 hours. It also fried a transformer in the East Coast, and it fried a transformer in the UK. But this was only 2 in North America, and it almost caused a cascading failure. Well, the 1921 one, the science modeling says it's going to fry and cook 350 or more of these transformers in the United States, 2,000 worldwide. Well, in the whole world, we make about 100 of these a year. So if we get 2,000 worldwide, that's like 20 years of production. Now, all of a sudden, grid down, grid collapse.
It's taken 100 years to build this grid up to where it is, and if it's anywhere near, like you're saying, the one that hit over 100 years ago, this would be devastating. Do we have any actuaries or ideas on how much would get knocked out?
Yeah, we're talking 350 in North America, 2,000 in the world for the 1921 storm. That's what the Meditech study, it was Sandia National Labs, Oak Ridge National Labs. Wow. They all checked it. So this is a big study. And this has been checked and verified.
So they know this, and they're just sitting there waiting for it to happen.
Well, here's the thing. They've put bills since 2008. They've had 2 different bills in Congress, and they've narrowly avoided passing it. The latest one's called the SHIELD Act. But the SHIELD Act is still kind of silly. It's like the SHIELD Act says, well, we're not going to do anything. We're the government, but we're going to make the utilities do something, spend a couple $2 billion to fix this problem. And then if they don't like it, then they can appeal to us and get some financial help. But the problem is the utilities are saying, we don't want to spend it, so they're fighting it.
Stay there. Amazing. Amazing, sir. This is so important. We'll be right back after this quick break. This couldn't be more important. Okay, we're back live, and before our guest leaves us here in about 40 minutes, we'll take a few calls if you have specific questions for our guest, Matthew Stein, author of When Disaster Strikes and When Technology Fails, best-selling author, MIT design engineer and builder, obviously, as well as a writer. And whentechnologyfails.com is one of the websites you can visit. It's excellent. And he put out this big report, 400 Chernobyls, solar flare, EMP, and nuclear Armageddon, because it's bad enough to have years of power outages and problems and infrastructure damage, but getting into the reactors, this is a short segment, long segment coming up, Mr. Stein, but obviously it's the reactors are one of the biggest threats, correct?
Yeah, the reactors are the end of the world as we know it problem, and this is the one where it's a no-brainer. We could solve this problem. I mean, there's no way to protect against all the bad effects of an EMP or a solar storm, but we can protect against nuclear Armageddon. Now, here's the ticket with nuclear power plants. When Fukushima blew up and melted down, it wasn't, at least according to Japanese authorities, it wasn't the direct effects of the large 9.0 earthquake. It was the after effect of the tsunami. And I'll explain. When every nuclear power plant has to keep its core cooled or it's going to melt down. You're generating like millions and millions of BTUs instantly in the power core, and that heat is used to generate all the power and the electricity out of steam generators. Well, if you stop running the fluid through that core, all that extra heat's going to go somewhere. It's going to melt the core down and blow the reactor. So when Fukushima blew, after the tsunamis came in and wiped out the backup generators. See, whenever the grid goes down, every nuclear reactor goes into automatic shutdown mode, where the reactor fuel rods and the control rods mesh together and start cooling it down. But there's so much heat in there, and the reactor doesn't stop like flipping a switch, so you got to keep that cooled for the next 3 to 5 years. You got to cool reactor rods after you start shutting them down. So what happened then is earthquake hit, reactor cut off from the grid went down, grid failed, reactor goes into shutdown mode, the backup generators kick on, the backup batteries kick in, and they keep the cooling pumps going. Well, 20 minutes later, the tsunami comes along, wipes out the cooling pumps. A couple hours later, you're going snap, crackle, pop. You're melting down the cores, and you're dissociating water into hydrogen and oxygen, making explosive gases, blowing the containment vessel, and we all saw what happened. Now, fast forward. We get a big, giant solar storm. And not like the little one, not like the big one. We get an extreme one. Big one, 1989, caused problems. Big one, 2003, fried 14 transformers in South Africa, screwed up the grid for an entire year, rolling blackouts to the whole country for a year, for only 14 transformers gone. Fast forward, we get one like 1921. We got a solar maximum coming up, end of 2012, beginning of 2013. We get one like 1921. They're really worried. Signs are looking like we might have a big one like that. All of a sudden, grids totally collapse, down for years in places, some places back short term. But where the dense population is, that's where the nuclear reactors are. That's where the grid collapses, where it's dense. That's where it collapses. Now, all of a sudden, you got chaos. Nobody's getting food. Nobody's getting gas. No pumps to pump. No fuel refined in the refineries, everything down over most of the industrialized parts of the planet, except for the deep tropical zones that disconnected from other parts of the grid. Suddenly, the government promises that they're going to show up at these reactors with diesel fuel like clockwork to make sure they're all working. All 104 reactors in America. We got 1/3, more than 1/3, 37% of all Americans live within 50 miles of a nuclear reactor.
Whoa, let me stop you. I see where you're going. They're built on our coastline. 70+% of our population's on the coast. The feds can't show up to bring water a week and a half in at Katrina. They can never help. They can't put out fires in Texas. All the feds do is show up and tell the locals to go under their command and then screw it up. There's no way the feds a couple weeks into this, they're going to be gone, and those things are going to start blowing.
They're going to start blowing. Now, chances are that the solar storm will not screw up electronics on a small scale. It'll just fry the grid. So chances are that most of those backup power systems will work. But they're only mandated by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to store 1 week's worth of fuel on hand. So when you go out and see this most incredible light show of your life at night, and you say, man, I can't believe this, you got to see this, this is incredible, it goes on for a night, maybe two, maybe a week, start the clock running. You got about a week before nuclear Armageddon, unless we fix the problem, and we can fix it.
By the way, you're a serious guy, but I've done my own research. What you're saying is accurate. And this is not hype, and I can tell you're concerned. I'm concerned too, and I make it my job to research this stuff. I've read it over the years, but never really consciously thought about this problem. Let's talk about it more when we get back. This is unbelievable.
We're on the march.
All right, we're going back to our guest here in a moment. He'll be with us about 5 minutes in the next hour. Then we have our other guest joining us. We'll have some calls then as well. But before we go to him, it's such a huge subject. I just want to remind listeners that this radio show, the nightly news, the documentary films, the news websites, Infowars.com, Prisonplanet.com, all of this serious information that we cover, this platform is funded by you supporting our sponsors and buying books, videos, T-shirts, and other materials at Infowars.com. And I hope that you will visit the online video bookstore. I hope that you will purchase T-shirts like the answer to 1984 is 1776, or this new one we've got that has the Liberty Bell on it, and it says, Got Liberty. It's just a great way to meet like-minded people. And it is your purchase of the books, T-shirts, videos, and things that makes this transmission possible. We're also running a new special that's basically similar to the New Year special. The huge percentage off on a yearly membership. It's Give the Gift of Truth at prisonplanet.tv. You may have heard of that from Glenn Beck. We've been saying for 9 years, give the gift of truth, give a prisonplanet.tv membership. So I said, hey, that's one of our old promotions from about 5 years ago. Bring back Give the Gift of Truth. When I saw Beck using it, the point is, I don't care. It's fine. The greatest form of flattery is imitation. But we've had prisonplanet.tv. It'll be 9 years in April. And we have amazing guests on like Mr. Stein, and we're truly independent and bold, and we wear our political affiliations for liberty and freedom on our sleeve. We don't hide it like the New York Times and others or Fox News saying, we report, you decide, give me a break. So I hope you will visit prisonplanet.tv and also become a member there. All the films, the nightly news, everything right there. It's also on Roku and a lot of other systems, so check it out at prisonplanet.tv. We're going to the next level here. Now, I want to go to Mark, Rob, Bev, Pappy, Richard, and others. We'll at least get to those calls. Folks in Indiana, New York, Illinois, Canada, you name it. But going back to our guest, I read his paper, and I was like, wow, I've seen stuff on the news, pieces of this where they admit it. And then I saw the study he was talking about where even the U.S. government admits this is a serious danger. And it's not like it's a possibility. They know someday, it might be 200 years, it might be next week, but they know the sun's going into one of these wild 100-year phases. It has like 10-year, 12-year phases. The point is, I've had sun experts on. I've had the physicist and the astrophysicist on, the meteorologists who have degrees in this on top of it, who say the sun's getting ready to go wild. And they know this is real. They know it messes up satellites, everything. And they know it's heated up lines that people were hanging their clothes on. The telegraph wires were heating up red hot. Some of the early light systems were blowing up. So if a big one hits, and but what's scary, going back to our guest, is Homer Simpson is sitting at the helm of a lot of these. We're seeing all these disasters. Let me ask your view on this, because I can't figure it out. Why do you think, Matthew Stein, why do you think there's so many more nuclear disasters now? Is it we just have better reporting, or these are aging systems? Why do you think we're seeing so many problems already?
Well, I think a big part is aging systems. The high level of radioactivity is really tough on metals. I mean, it takes very special alloys to make the steel inside of these things. And these things were originally planned for 20-year lives, and now we're boosting 40, 50 years in some of them. So essentially, they're not building many new plants in this part of the world, though they've got a couple hundred in plans for other parts of the world. And so this stuff, when it ages, they don't know what to do with it. There's no place to put all the stuff. And that's a big, scary part, is that each reactor has something called spent fuel ponds. Any reactor has been around a while.
Fukushima had 645,000 of them, and they blew for miles around.
Yeah, see, they had a spent fuel pond typically has more than 10 years' worth of reactor cores, old reactor cores, stored under 20 feet of water. Now, when you cut out the power, in between a few minutes to a few hours, the reactor core will melt down and start blowing its stuff. When you cut out the power to cooling the spent fuel ponds, depending on how recently they decommissioned the core, like if they just unloaded a reactor core, it's super hot, and it'll boil out that 24 feet of water covering those fuel rods in between 4 and 22 days. So basically, when the pumps stop, within a few hours, you're blowing the reactor cores, but they're contained in giant, massive steel containment vessels. Then right next door, they got this pond that basically is inside of a standard industrial tilt-up building with a corrugated steel roof, and they got 10 years worth, like over 10 cores in there in that pond. And in a few days, without cooling pumps, the pond will be boiling down, boiling down, boiling down. In Fukushima, if it wasn't for the heroic actions on the part of the workers who flew over in helicopters and got guns out, and these guys are going to die really early deaths.
A lot of them have already started to die, but they always say they die of something else. The Fukushima 50.
Right. So these guys, if they hadn't refilled that pond, you would have seen 10 Chernobyls going off into the atmosphere right there in Fukushima. Those guys gave their lives to save us from 10 Chernobyls. See, Fukushima officially has dumped half the radiation of Chernobyl, but almost all of that into the ocean, not the atmosphere. But unofficially, people say it might be 2 to 5 times as much as Chernobyl, but again into the ocean. But if that cooling pond had blown, we would have seen 10 Chernobyls worth burning directly into the atmosphere and spreading around the planet.
You know what's freaking me out? We have best-selling author and MIT design engineer, green builder, you name it, joining us here. WhenTechFails.com is the website. What's freaking me out is I've done all this research, and everything he's saying and more is documented. And I was just reading in Japanese news last week that they're not even taking very good care of the Fukushima 50 and their families. It's this society now where the bureaucrats think that they're magic and have magical thinking, and the corporations do. And just
fried a transformer in the East Coast, and it fried a transformer in the UK. But this was only 2 in North America, and it almost caused a cascading failure. Well, the 1921 one, the science modeling says it's going to fry and cook 350 or more of these transformers in the United States, 2,000 worldwide. Well, in the whole world, we make about 100 of these a year. So if we get 2,000 worldwide, that's like 20 years of production. Now, all of a sudden, grid down, grid collapse.
It's taken 100 years to build this grid up to where it is, and if it's anywhere near, like you're saying, the one that hit over 100 years.
It was Sandia National Labs, Oak Ridge National Labs. Wow. They all checked it. So this is a big study. And this has been checked and verified.
So they know this, and they're just sitting there waiting for it to happen.
Well, here's the thing. They've put bills since 2008. They've had 2-21 storm, which was supposedly 50% less than the 1859. So 1989, we have a big storm, way bigger than the one we had a week ago, way bigger. And that fried a transformer in Quebec, knocked out power to 9 million people for something like 6 hours. It also...
ago, this would be devastating. Do we have any actuaries or ideas on how much would get knocked out?
Yeah. We're talking 350 in North America, 2,000 in the world for the 1921 storm. That's what the Meditech study,